Hey, what's going on? So I work on elevators, and I got a bunch of friends that work over at SFO, San Francisco International. So they're shutting down the airport terminal by terminal. And one of the things I've been doing over the course of the week is through them and other people and other locals asking what was going on at all the major airports. And what we were able to figure out is one of the main reasons why it was probably spreading was they were disinfecting a lot of surfaces, but they weren't disinfecting any of the escalators or the moving walks at any of the major airports. None of that was happening. So those things were like huge breeding grounds for everybody that was passing through all the airports. So there's like a group now of about like 40 different guys in different major airports who I'm trying to figure out how to coordinate it exactly, but we're going to try and talk to them about, I don't know, getting them to clean those off. But one of the things they've been really worried about is they're telling all the maintenance staff or the crucial maintenance staff there that even if they start to shut down the airports regardless, they're going to keep them all still working because, I don't know, I guess they want to be able to maintain like some minor level of activity regardless. But from what I'm hearing, it sounds like the airport infrastructure, at least in the United States, they're trying to like gradually slow it to a halt. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give some sense of sort of what's going on in the schools. I'm a teacher in Oakland Public Schools. So what happened for us was Oakland was one of the last districts in the Bay Area to decide to shut down. Oakland Unified waited until Friday morning when classes were already in session. That meant teachers and all staff and students really had no time to prepare for the fact that we were going to be out of school for an extended period of time. Their immediate reaction was to try to figure out who they could still make come into school. So for example, at my site, classified staff, the attendance clerk, contract workers, the security guard were all told that they were going to have to come in on Monday. That changed once the shelter in place went in order, but they still had the security guards showing up to guard completely empty schools, many of them working in groups. The custodians came in to deep clean on Monday, putting their health at risk. If they would have just let the custodians stay home for a week, the virus could have died. But instead, they had custodians coming in 48 hours later and deep cleaning everything. In terms of the situation for students, the food workers have still been going in to cook meals for students. So those are being provided on Mondays and Thursdays. In my case, I work at a continuation high school for newcomer students, and many of them are undocumented and unaccompanied minors. They're working to support themselves. And just to give some sense, I think, of how this is impacting a huge chunk of the population, almost every single, or a majority of them have been laid off. They've lost their jobs. They're not eligible for unemployment. They've been left with nothing. We've been making calls to students on a regular basis. Just 2 weeks into this, that means that many of them have hardly any food left. Their wallets are empty. They're afraid of being evicted. They're afraid of having their phones turned off. And so I think, just to share a little bit of how the crisis is impacting people locally here. How have people responded? Immediately, all the staff at school have worked together to create a case management system, and we've been reaching out to students every day, and I've seen different things like that across many schools, across many different districts. And I think the other thing that gives me hope in a really brutal time period is just what this has really revealed is all of the rot and the brokenness of this system. And people are really beginning to raise larger questions. So if we can have a society with no evictions now, why would we ever accept evictions? If we can have a society where they're not going to turn off the electricity and the water just during a pandemic, why would we ever accept that under any circumstances? Joan mentioned in her presentation, part of what we have to do now is organize and fight back, because we know they'll use this crisis to further enrich themselves at the expense of ordinary people. And so in Oakland, what that's looked like is a continued fight against charter co-locations and closures. So obviously we can't get together physically, but that's meant a digital protest. And that's been really hard to pull together. It's not easy, obviously. People are overwhelmed and emotionally fried by the amount of Zoom calls and check-ins on students. But I think the fact that people were still able to come together and make that happen, and so just wanted to share that as an example.
I work at BART, which is a public transit system in the Bay Area, for those who don't know. Coworkers have a real lack of understanding what we're up against. Generally speaking, contradictory information confuses a lot of us. Yet we are told that we are essential workers and have to come into work while no one else does. We risk being infected every day at work, while management and most office workers have been told to work from home. Management promises that they are doing everything they can to protect workers and the public. But even before all this began, janitors who cleaned the station said they had run out of bleach and Lysol a month ago. That was before the coronavirus even arrived. Supplies are even more scarce now. Train operators don't have their own supplies of latex gloves or N95 face masks. So when they tried to get some from the stockroom, they were berated by other workers who saw supplies running low. There are spaces where people report to work that have no one regularly cleaning them for years. Now it should probably be fully disinfected, I think, every day. But will it? I don't think so. Management says trains are being disinfected, but really, how often is that? I've only seen in the last 2 weeks, most train cars have only been disinfected twice. Other workers in other places have been fighting for a full week to demand that train cars coming in for repairs are being disinfected. Management does not have any plan or protocol in place for if and when somebody becomes ill, and they say testing is out of the question. The 6 feet rule is assumed to be impossible in our environment on a daily basis, so we don't even try. Most coworkers cannot take it seriously, otherwise we wouldn't be coming in. While we're allowed to borrow up to 3 weeks of sick time and will not be disciplined for using as much as we want, we're told that BART's sick leave policies are already generous. And if we feel the need to stay home to decrease the risk of infection, we're told to use the time that we have on the books. People are still coming into work because they need the money or don't want to burn up the hard-earned sick time, which means we won't have it if and when we do become sick. There are some who think the risk is exaggerated, but I think that's a minority. Generally, people feel lucky to still have a job, but the threat of layoffs with the uncertain future overshadows a lot of us. This anxiety and fear can quickly turn into anger. Once infections and deaths reach our personal lives and families, the risks we're asked to take daily will enrage us, I think, especially with the backdrop of massive corporate bailouts and handouts. There's no telling where that anger will go. Thank you.
Well, I'm a person who has had compromised immune system for many years and have been living in isolation because of mobility issues for 5 years. What I am thinking at this time is to take the anger and the fear and the frustration to build it from where's it going to go after? I hear a lot and I agree and I empathize. And I want to say, let's document the atrocities and the horrors. Let's move forward of what it's going to look like. I have a 5-year-old granddaughter. What is the world going to look for her? I have an 18-year-old granddaughter. What is it going to look like for her? So what do we, a hug is going to be like a possible contagion, I don't want to turn this world into that. I want to, and I think Joan spoke about this, of inventorying and assessing what we have that is available, the resources to keep people from getting sick. And I want to add to that, what do we have that is going to advance the concept of the dysfunction of capitalism? We can have a moratorium on rent, so why do we even have rent? Let's keep going with that concept. Let's make sure that people have their basic needs met. The commodification of anything, food, shelter, clothing, medical care, the commodification of these things is off. I don't agree. I don't participate. Let's get a lot of people together to say, no, we don't buy it. Thanks.
I'm a college student from Denver. I go to a private university here. And I'm also a local urban farmer who works with a small organization called Frontline Farming. And I just want to speak a little bit to the student experience as well as from the agricultural experience. But they didn't actually close my school down until about a week and a half ago. And they continued making me go into my work study into the building where we had confirmed cases even a week after, which really did not make me happy. And I didn't really understand why anybody, including my own director, was still going into the building. But the point that I want to get to is the fact that like food still needs to be distributed out to everybody, especially during quarantine. And we tend to think about the food that we're eating and not really the people who are growing it. And I think that the current situation could definitely exacerbate what already exists. The fraud and illegal recruitment and unpaid reimbursement and the overcrowded living quarters of undocumented workers who get to come to the States on like H-2 visas. And so currently they're not allowing any new applicants, but people who had applied for these things for the H-2 visa are still being allowed to come in. But then, like I said before, they're still being overcrowded in the living quarters. And so there's a worry there that this virus still could be transmitted, especially in these close quarter livings, as well as all the food that they're touching. And so that is something to take into consideration. And so as we the people still need a stable food supply to maintain healthy diets and strong immune systems, especially now during this health crisis. I see that the failure to take necessary action to protect our food supply will definitely result in, bare shelves in grocery stores, not from panic buying, but as a result of the federal government directly causing a shortage of critical labor and not valuing agricultural labor to begin with. And so luckily, my organization is still continuing to do our work, and we're doing it in a quarantine basis and quarantine manner in order to still distribute to, those populations here in Denver that definitely won't be able to go to the grocery store or don't have enough money to go to the grocery store and provide to our local community. So I just wanted to, share that.
Hi there, everyone. I work at Kaiser Oakland in the emergency department. I'm a tech, and we've been told on a daily basis what protocols to take, but they change every single day. And, we've been told that we need to stay flexible. We've been told that things change at a moment's notice, but we also realize within a week of the outbreak and being here in the US, we also ran out of bleach wipes and sanitation wipes and weren't told when we were going to get any. So folks are actually bringing in their own Clorox sprays to disinfect the tools that they're having to use. We've been told to use the gowns in multiple rooms for patients, and then we're told, okay, well, now you can take them off. I actually just came back from work today, so I was a little late to listen to the beginning. But the one thing that's been positive, but also a shameful thing to think about is I work for Kaiser, which is an organization that has millions of dollars. It is a hospital that is widely known in the West Coast here. And we shouldn't have to be begging for masks. We should have had them to begin with, and we should have prepared once we saw, a technical claim of a pandemic happening. And the Nurses Association actually had a demonstration about it, which I think was useful. it got some PR, and the interesting thing I found with it was that my union specifically, which is not CNA, it's SEIU, didn't feel like they wanted to participate because they were concerned more about protecting workers not getting laid off. They were not concerned. They have some concern, but they were saying that they were reaching out to certain companies so that they can get donations from them. And we've been told that it's been successful. We also, today at work, had Home Depot workers donate face shield masks, probably 20 boxes, and full face, full gowns for our department, which is great. It's a wonderful thing. It's like, do we weigh the positive or the negative? The positive thing that people want to give to healthcare workers that are in the front lines, but it's just a sad thing that a company with so much money would have to rely on donations or have to rely on workers bringing in their own things so that we feel safe. And they've been also, that's just one example. The one thing that I took note of today was, since we are out of sanitation wipes that are disposable, we're using is a vinegar-based product that supposedly states that it gets rid of bacteria and viruses. And for when it first came out, we were asking for an evidence-based, like, does this really work? And they finally came out with it. And we're using these wipes, and our EVS workers, which is the sanitation workers, are having to replace the bins every 4 hours. They have to toss these wet wipes, which are a lot heavier. And they're having to essentially rotate more in our department more frequent. And I'm assuming more frequent in other departments as well. So it means more work on top of what they already had to do, which means like they're not increasing the staffing. It doesn't seem like there's a push to try to hire more people. We've been told that in our department, budgets don't matter, so they have hired some nurses, but I don't know how much that seems to be a general census for the facility in general or the company in general.
I am a senior last semester student in Rutgers University in New Jersey, but right now I'm in South Carolina because that's where my mom lives. So I immediately came here right as schools were closed. So we're 99% sure that we have the virus, like my mom and I, because she's had every single symptom, and we've had exposure to airports in the last 3 weeks, and she's been sick for over a week and has every single symptom, including the loss of the sense of smell. And we both have asthma, so that's a pre-existing condition that we're afraid of. But we can't get tested because apparently they don't take you in for testing unless you're really extremely sick, and hospitals are all loaded, and they're not going to take us because my mother is sick, but she's not like absolutely terribly sick. She can still be okay, but it's still not acceptable that they're not taking us in for testing. And the closest drive-by testing is an hour away, and she's too sick to make that drive, and I'm not good enough at driving, so I can't drive us, so we're basically stuck. And also, she is a professor, and she told her students and her dean that she's really sick and that she probably has the virus, but so that's why she can't give her online classes right now for her school. But her students basically reported her to the dean and complained about her, saying that, oh, she's not keeping up with us or anything. And then the dean told her she needs to get proof that she has the virus. Otherwise, like her position might be compromised. So she can't get tested and she can't get a break from work. Like there's nothing to do like around this. And we live in the capital of South Carolina. Like this is not we're not in the middle of a rural field. We're in like a high density zone and we still can't get tested. This is absolutely unacceptable.
I'm a student in UC Berkeley. I'm a senior, and I'm kind of stuck here because I'm an international student, and they are, as someone said before, shut down all the airport. Something that I would like to share is maybe folks have heard about this, but there was this movement called Cola for All that has been going on for a few months right now across the UCs. Hey, Getsia. You know, it started off in UC Santa Cruz and it spread to other UCs and right now to Oregon State University too. It still is a strike by grad students demanding, you know, cost of living adjustment and all that. The thing is, the campus shut itself down right when the grad students here declared themselves strike ready. There was a lot of fear mongering, although there were also like confirmed cases. And for a long time, the labs and sports events in the universities, in the university kept going. So basically, those are the venues where the university makes money. Right now, they are shut down too. But for a while, they kept going. But what I'm seeing is it really disoriented a lot of people, and it really, really undermined the strike. You know, they tried to hold a so-called virtual picket line, which is to say, we're not going to do any Zoom classes, we're not going to submit any grades. But they have, I mean, the grads have been doing that because everyone is so disoriented. And just, you know, really demoralized. My question to folks is, how do people cope with that? And especially now that we're in an atmosphere where we are not supposed to get together physically, I'm hearing a lot of great demands, not paying your bills, not paying your rent, not paying your XYZ, and, you know, getting sick leaves and like being paid full wages whether you're working or not. The question is, how do we push forward for these demands, given that we are not supposed to get together because of like health reasons, and given that everybody is so disoriented? I would like to hear people's opinions or experiences on that. Thank you.
I think one thing that blows me away and the thing that I want to share is kind of the lack of preparation that was done. I work at a very large institution, a financial institution, and we have known about this forever, but then we weren't doing anything to every one of us could do our jobs from home essentially. Whether we were allowed to or not was a different matter before the coronavirus. However, there was no preparation at all put in place as we saw everything happening in China and around the world. Not from upper management, or at least our immediate upper management. They kind of just started panicking as soon as things started to close down nationally, and then they had every last minute resort in the book, and lo and behold, everyone that couldn't do their job from home can now do their jobs from home, even though they've been telling people for years that they couldn't. They managed to pull it out in 1 week. There were, of course, there were some complications, but for the most part, they got mostly everyone there. So it's just like the lack of preparation and what can be accomplished in like such a short time frame when people actually want to do it, and AKA their profits are threatened. And another thing is there was few people that they weren't able to get work from home, and then it's in Pennsylvania, and there was a closing of all non-essential businesses, and it's amazing how many businesses consider themselves essential when they have to close down, because there is by no means is my financial institution essential in any way, shape, or form in terms of people surviving. It's not related to healthcare. It's not related to food. It's not related to shelter. It's completely non-essential. However, we receive multiple emails and calls every single night to keep going to work because we are an essential business in the eyes of the people, our bosses, essentially.
I'm a teacher in Irvington. Last week, Irvington Public Schools, they all closed down. I've been furloughed for about a week now. And being 22, I didn't know anything, obviously, about the process of applying for unemployment. I didn't understand the economic relief bill that was just recently passed. I still don't quite understand all of it. I'm getting more information as it rolls in. But the reason I'm concerned is because literally last night, both my mother and father both got the flu with temperatures of 102 and rising. So I'm worried, and they have all the symptoms as well as Eleanor does of the coronavirus. And I know nothing about how to get them to a proper testing site. I don't know how to drive. So if they're sick, I wouldn't know what to do. And I can't. And my mother's still working. She works at the airport of all places. So she's definitely the most high density area to get infected. And so that concerns me. And so I'm really scared for myself and my family.
Ali asked a crucial question. What can we do about this? We have many wonderful things we want, but how are we going to implement them? Where we can't have a picket, we can't have a mass rally, we can't have a demonstration. And the answer is it's going to be very hard, but not impossible, I've been trying to follow what the labor movement's been doing, and I've seen things falling into 4 boxes or categories. One was pressure for institutions to close. We saw rank and file and union action in the New York City and Chicago public schools. Secondly was strikes for institutions to close, such as occurred in the Detroit auto plants. The third thing we've seen are strikes for better cleaning supplies, PPE, equipment, and so on. There have certainly been at least short walkouts amongst Teamster grocery workers in Memphis, chicken workers at Purdue in Georgia, sanitation workers in the South, and amongst the bus drivers and in Minneapolis and in Birmingham, Alabama. We've also seen pressure campaigns like V talked about of the San Francisco nurses here in Chicago amongst members of the government employees who work at VA hospitals and at CTA ATU members on the bus and L. Finally, one unusual footnote of this situation is that in Chicago, a hotel called the 116 has been requisitioned by the city to use as an overflow hospital. This hotel had been on strike, a Unite Here hotel workers strike for about 14 or 15 months, and it looked like it had very little prospect for success. But due to the need for the hotel to be rebooted, the bosses pushed the owners of the hotel to settle with the union very rapidly. So it's a hard and a frightening situation, but not an impossible one. Thank you.
Thank you. Couple of things very quickly. Trump declared Maryland a disaster state just a few days ago, though it's certainly not in as bad a situation as many other places around the country, including on the East Coast like New York. But maybe it's because the National Security Agency has its headquarters in Maryland. I don't know. And there are many other federal facilities here just outside of Washington. But the most hard hit by the virus part of the state so far, and I say so far, is in the Washington suburbs. And I think they have about half the cases in the entire state. And I think that's probably because there are so many people who either live or work in Washington, who travel a lot, who go through airports and all that kind of thing. And so it's a pretty intense thing. Here in Baltimore, it's not as bad yet, but it's still in a state of emergency. And I think it's very likely that Baltimore's a very large, low-income, underinsured, primarily African-American working-class neighborhoods are going to be hit very hard. Many of the people in the city use emergency rooms for their regular medical care because they don't have primary care providers, they don't have insurance, and so on. So if you have to go to an ER now, you risk exposing yourself to the virus when you have something else going on. Last night, a friend of ours who is about my age, in her 70s, had to go to an emergency room for a non-coronavirus emergency and spent several hours sitting there, risking her life. What choice did the system offer her? None. So I want to reiterate some of the things that other people have said. Adam, just a moment ago, about the kinds of organizing that are possible. And I don't want to go on about that, but we're here with Speak Out in Baltimore. And if any of you are in that area and want to contact us directly, please email us at baltimore@speakoutsocialists.org.
Okay, hello to everybody. I'm calling from Berlin. Hi. So nice to nice to hear you and nice to follow the discussion. So only some words, but of course we are facing the same problems, the same questions like you have. So for Berlin, we have a kind of curfew since 1 week. So it's not forbidden to go out, but we all have to stay at home, except you have good reasons to go out, like going to work, of course. So these are one of the problems the workers are facing. We have also like the train workers also, or the nurses, they all need to go to work and they are called heroes. So everybody is a hero now, a hero at hospital and the cleaners, and every night at 7 p.m. People stand on their balconies and clapping with the hands, yeah, for the heroes. So, but we saw some struggles and some fights in the last years and months. Nurses fighting for better wages, cleaners for wages, for more staff, and so. And so, but they have the problems like you already talked about with their own security. And on the other hand, like for the train workers, there's nothing to protect them. So they struggle with everything, with cleaning, with disinfection. And yeah, it's a big problem, like you already explained. And the German government, this week, they made couple of laws to protect the companies, but who protects the workers? Yes, that's a good question for us too. And what the workers also see in a big, in a lot of branches like the car industry, they are facing reduced working times. I don't know the exact technical word, but it says that you work only half time or even less, even quite zero. And in Germany, by law, you can get some money from agencies, but it's in fact the state who finally pays the wages. So for companies like Volkswagen, really huge companies like Volkswagen or Bayer Sharing, yes, they save money because for weeks they want to try to let the state pay the wages. and yes, to save their profits. So these reduced working times is one of the problems for the working class in Germany. And obviously we have some, in front of us, there are some big layoffs. But for the moment, it's not like the case like you have in the United States. It looks like that in Germany, like in the crisis 2009, that they tried to keep the workforce, or mainly to keep the workforce, but not to pay them, and then to restart economy as soon as possible with their workforce. So we will see, but anyway, we are sure that in some months, the state and the companies will pay the workers. So we hope that the working class will react and fight. It's not so easy, also for the German workers. So
we're here in Brooklyn right now, just to give a little bit of an update on what's happening here, and also in Hawaii, where my family is. We've been kind of social distancing for about 2 weeks. The school that I teach at closed down a little, maybe 2.5 weeks ago, and the restaurant that I work in was shut down as well by the government. Even before my restaurant shut down, in the final days before it closed, everyone on staff was like a total mess, as I'm sure like a lot of people that are still working can relate. And people, at least among my coworkers, like the people that work in the front of the house, were ready. We like drafted a letter, and a bunch of people signed on a letter that we were going to like post to the restaurant website, like asking them to close the restaurant. So that was like an interesting moment just of solidarity. I know in my family is all in Maui right now, where pretty much most of the population has lost their jobs because their economy is like completely dependent on tourism. My mom, my brother, and sister all filed for unemployment last week. My dad is in the construction industry, and they're actually kind of trying to say, oh, this might be a stimulus for the construction industry, because now that the tourists are gone, we can go in and remodel all these hotels and like make them all nice. So he's going back to work next week, even though that's like the opposite of what should be happening right now. But he's relieved because, you know, he's worried about money. Here in our apartment, we're just kind of trying to start networking with our neighbors. We put out, there's like a lot of talk here about, like, as in many places, calls to cancel rent, talking about a rent strike. What is that? We put up notes kind of just for mutual aid at our building, like maybe about 2 weeks ago, to see if people needed errands run or wanted to help. Our building's not being cleaned at all. It's owned by a huge property management company that, like, I just looked it up, and I think they own like 100 buildings across New York. They have been doing nothing to deal with the problem, and there are a lot of elderly people in this building. There's like 38 units, I think. So we're now just kind of trying to talk to people as we pass them coming and going from the building, and starting like text group, Facebook group, and just also connecting with other activists that are doing that. There's like a Flatbush wide neighborhood Zoom call happening in a few nights that we're gonna get on and touch base with other people. So that's like a little update from Brooklyn.
Yeah, I'm up on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish nations, the Squamish, Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and the Kamel nations. Here, I'll be brief. Here in Canada as a whole, the government response has been to bail out big business and landlords. Predominantly, there's a over $100 billion package that they just voted on a couple of nights ago, and there's about $50 billion going towards bailing out banks in the form of giving mortgage relief to the banks and not to property owners or not to mortgage holders. And there's a huge amount that's still not determined, tens of billions that will be going towards oil and gas corporations that actually filed a petition asking for a big bailout before COVID began because of a dip in the industry. And the Trudeau Liberal government is looking to be, they're angling to do a major bailout of that industry, not only in direct money, but also in a halt on taxation. They're giving them a huge taxation package, like a tax vacation to support the oil and gas industry. And in British Columbia and Alberta, the two western provinces, up in the north where huge oil and gas industry projects have been ongoing and booming, it's the single construction industry space that has been exempted from orders to self-isolate. So they keep these massive, what people call man camps, going throughout this crisis. There's camps of 5,000 men, mostly men, in ATCO trailers and mass 1,000-person dining halls that are still being kept on the job. There's been one documented case of someone diagnosed with COVID up in Alberta, and the province, although going out and calling for people to stay home every day, and closing down a lot of industries in the cities, are stubbornly continuing to keep these huge operations going, which is a big liability. I'm mostly focused on organizing with unhoused and poor people in communities throughout the province, and low-income people have been really hit hard by this, because not only do they tend to have weakened immune systems and be really vulnerable because of health conditions and because of poverty, they also have lost services. So we called around to 64 soup kitchens in the province this week and found that half of them have completely closed down, and all the rest of them have moved to just bagged lunches rather than hot meals. So people who need to be having their nutrition kept up are suffering a big blow. And about half of the homeless shelters in the province have also closed, and the rest of those that are remaining open have frozen their beds so that if people leave, nobody else can come in. So this is we think that this is a big problem. It shows that there is a division in terms of the public, who's part of the public that's cared for by the public health system in Canada, and who's shut out and treated as a danger to that public. Well, that's kind of perspective up here.
Just a few words to say first that as you have said, I don't think that Trump is a problem, because we face quite the same problem in France with Macron's gang. They are not much worthier as Trump's gang. And I would also share, because I've heard the story of Eleanor's mother, that my girlfriend was sick 2 weeks ago, but relax, she's out of trouble since 3 days, and she has not been tested also. But 1 week ago, we've read in the local newspaper that our mayors, the guy who's running the municipal council, had been tested. So there are tests for big people, but not for rank and file people, and that's very that gives us a lot of anger. I was maybe also contagious, because I'm living with her. We are confined since 2 weeks now, and because of confinement, maybe I did not give the coronavirus to other people, but the situation in which I am is quite good, because I don't fear to be evicted. I'm teacher, and in France, most of the teacher get their wage from state, and we've got a lot of protection. So we did not face the situation of Eleanor's mother. I mean, to have to prove that we were under coronavirus, we were sick of coronavirus. We didn't have to prove it to get our wage. And in fact, I think that maybe the situation in the US is worse than in France, because the level of social inequalities is maybe a bit bigger, but the common fact of the situation all across the world, I think, is that this crisis unveils the social inequalities. In France, you've got teleworking for white collars, and blue collars people, they have to go to work. They have they are supposed to go to work, and the only only resistance, the only fact that makes that the factory have been shut down is that resistance from a lot of workers who have been visiting their doctors, who have been using some rights in the law, in the labor law, which allows people to withdraw from work if they are supposed to be in unsafety situations. But the attitude of the government is to say, you have to stay at home, but also you have to go to work in the same time. And they have passed some laws this last week to cut down those law that allows you to withdraw from work. So in the next week, there will be a bigger pressure on the rank and file workers to go to work, and if there is no resistance, maybe there will be a lot more people who will get sick from coronavirus just because they get in touch with each other. The last thing I want to say is that in France we've got some resistance, not resistance in a way, but support for health workers. People every day at 8 o'clock in the evening, they got out of their residential buildings, they open the window and they shout, they scream, they sing things, and so on and so on. But for a lot of us who are active in France, it sounds a bit, it's not so good, because there are a lot of people who can say, hey, you good people, healthcare workers, but they will vote again for Macron and they will be okay for budget cuts in the hospital budgets.
Hi. Yeah, I really appreciate the discussion. I think it's very stimulating. It might start to, when we start to examine these things, bring us down a little. But I think the thing is, none of us, or very few of us, maybe people who are working in Central Africa, maybe with the Ebola crisis, might have confronted something like this, but very few of us have. So we can see from the call that there's a large range of needs that are in front of us, individual, collective, and that's, I'd like to reinforce what people said in the early part of this. It absolutely shows the necessity for us to maintain and build links at this point. That is something that we can do. It is something that really deals with the immediate and also prepares for the future, because we're certainly not going to be able to rely on those people who are responsible for this crisis. So are there things we can do? That was a question. We've heard some things, people beginning to prepare for the question of rents. That's absolutely essential. We're going to be in this situation for a while. None of us know exactly how long. So one thing is we can't get too hasty. This isn't going to be an instantaneous thing. And we also have to be creative. We heard, I believe it was Adam, talk about some of the actions in the workplace. I've been in touch with people in Detroit. I'm in the Bay Area, but live there. And there we saw people walk out, small groups to begin with, and the Canadian workers walked out, gave heart to some other people, and they walked out. People in the Oakland schools, teachers there, have been very active, bringing people together. They were on strike before, but now things petered out a little. They always go into a lull, some disappointment after that high. But there's a move, as was said, the people in power are not sitting still. So there's a move to close some of the schools in Oakland and begin to hand them over to charter schools. So those people organized what they called an hour of power, which actually I believe went for 3 days. So it was a long hour. And they just hammered the people who are responsible for this, the school board, the people who are the charterizers and that sort of things. There have been enough pressures brought to bear that some of that is slowing down. So I really want to reinforce that idea that what we have to do right now is do what we can do, and every step we take at this moment is to be prepared. And prepared for the future. Sometimes we have to deal with something that's very immediate, that Javon had the courage to bring up in front of a bunch of people who were strangers, but it really shows that we are not alone in this process. There's just one quick thing. There was a guy who's on his email list, and one of the things that he said the other day was that his subject line says, we can't go back to normal because the normal was the problem. And I think we have to keep that in mind. When we come out of this, we have to really be prepared to bring all the power that we have. We can see the ability. We have some, we crossed into Europe. Next time we need to bring some other people together on this. And for those people who didn't get to talk, there's next week, which will even be better.